Hey everyone, and welcome. Hello to replay viewers. My name is Jenn Walker-Wall. I'm the founder of Work Wonders Careers, and I'm here today to do a job search Q&A. So this is very much by request. There were so many people and so many questions from our last LinkedIn Live Pep Talk that I couldn't answer them all in the time provided. So today's live stream and today's Pep Talk is really about the questions that you have if you're here today. And for the people who submitted their questions over the past couple of weeks, thank you. I have some ready to go. If you are here and watching, feel free to say hello and let me know where you're watching from. I am based in Boston, and I'm just going to give folks a little bit of time to start to come in, and then we'll kick things off. If you're here, feel free to say hello and let me know that you're watching. Otherwise, I really have no idea. All right, someone's here with a lot of enthusiasm for 2021. I'm really glad to hear it. I know I'm ready for the change of year. I know it doesn't change everything, but I'll take any fresh start I can get at pretty much any point. So awesome. Hello. Michigan, Oceanside, California. Awesome. Welcome. Milford, Mass. Watching from London, North Carolina, Troy. Oh, that's so fantastic. Hello. Boston also. Great. Awesome. South Florida. Ooh, I'm so jealous. Hey, from DC. I'll see you later tonight. Awesome. Great. Well, it is so wonderful to have all of you here, and I want to make sure we have tons of time for your questions. So here's my thought. I have some questions that I collected ahead of time. Milford, Mass. That's great, Steve. And I'll start with those, and then we can take questions live. So if you have questions, I'm just going to ask that you save them because I'm afraid that I'll miss them. Last time I missed a lot of questions. And so I'm going to start with some questions that I received ahead of time. And let me before I do that, let me just share this, bit.ly/Pep Talk show notes. You can head on over there. And what I'm doing there is I'm treating them like a podcast of show notes. So any references that I think I'm going to name, I'll put in the show notes. I did some proactively, but I'll go back and edit them. And you can bookmark this for yourself. And that way you'll know what resources I'm talking about. And also when our next Pep Talks will be, because we have some for the new year as well. All right, I'll reshare the link too in the recording, so if anyone misses it, no worries. This is the first question that I got, and what I tried to do is make sure that the questions were as general as possible because I think a lot of people share. And so this question is, how can I find a job without experience? And can I make a career pivot right now? Or are hiring managers only willing to hire experienced candidates? So I wanted to spend some time talking about this. And I thought this was you know what? Let me start my captioning. I didn't do that. I always test it beforehand, but it doesn't start automatically. So let's see. Testing, 1, 2, 3, perfect, awesome. Okay, so I want to start with this question because what I think is so important here is that everyone has experience. If you've been job seeking for a really long time, or if you're making a career change, it can feel really like you don't have relevant experience. It can feel like you don't have what it takes to check all of those boxes. But what I really work with people to do is to reframe that question. How do I find a job without experience? To what is the experience that I have, and how can I position that in the clearest, most compelling way to the hiring manager and the recruiters who are assessing candidates? And this changes the whole conversation because honestly, people aren't hiring people who have no experience, but there's almost no people with no experience. So you want to share your relevant experience. So let me give you a sense of what counts as experience. And let me just try to share some clients that I've worked with. So I had a client who took a long career break to raise her family and is trying to get back into the workforce. Now, during this time, she didn't have paid employment, but she was volunteering with her kids. She was volunteering at a church. She had a ton of volunteer and informal work. And so that is experience. It means that she has great organization skills, relationship skills, communication skills. She's able to share that on her resume in a way that makes sense for the jobs that she was looking for. And she was looking for an administrative type role, and she was doing some administrative type work. So that's really how she framed it. So I really want you to pay attention to What is the experience that you do have? And how can you frame it in a clear and compelling way? And sometimes this means adopting the language of the potential employer or company where you might be, just to see if that helps translate your experience. So sometimes instead of clients, you might need to use the language of the company or organization that you're targeting with. And maybe for them, it's not clients, it's students or parents or customers, right? Sometimes really small changes like that can go a really long way. Now, to this other point of, can I make a career pivot right now? Hey, Jen. Oh, I'm glad you're here. I think this is definitely possible. But again, what this really comes down to is articulating your relevant experience and honing in on the right kinds of opportunities for you. So when I say to my clients, like, not every job is meant for a career transitioner, that means jobs that require like 15 or 20 years or some major set of years of experience, like significant deep experience in a field, may not be the right role for you to target if you're brand new. But look for roles that really emphasize soft skills and relationship skills, because those are much easier to pivot and align with. Another thing that I'll just add here too, and I'll come back to this in some of my answers to these questions, is, you can really use your relationships here. People love to talk about the hidden job market. I don't really ever use that term, maybe because when you work in HR, it's really not hidden at all. But it's really common for hiring managers to have people in their network, recruiters too, who they have in mind for different kinds of roles. And you can use this time as an opportunity to build and nurture those relationships so that you could be those kinds of candidates that people are recruiting into different opportunities. All right, so if anyone has any other questions about that, feel free to follow up in the comments. I'm happy to respond. But what I would love is I'm sure whoever asked the question in the event page is here. If you've ever experienced this, if you felt like you didn't have enough experience for the job, type a 1 in the comments, just so people can see that they're not alone here. I would type a 1 in the comments if I could type and read at the same time. It's really common. And really what we want to learn to do is articulate our relevant experience. Pay attention to those job postings and let people know what is relevant, and try to use their language and speak on their terms and be as specific as you can. All right, let me get to our next question. Oops. I see some 1s coming in. Awesome. All right. How can I land a job in another state or signal that I'm willing or ready to move for the right opportunity? So this is a really common question, and I have a couple of ideas for people who are in this position right now. Just please note all of the 1s in the chat box. Everyone has felt like they don't have the right experience at one time or another. Very normal. So here are a couple of things. There's a few different situations that you could be experiencing. So one of them is you're planning to move to another state. Let's just say you're planning to move to New York. You're looking for jobs in New York. You could be really explicit and let people know you're moving, and let people know when you'll be there. So that's one thing that you can do in your cover letter or your resume. I don't recommend taking up a ton of space with the explanation there. I think it can be a real concise, but should be pretty clear part so that people know I will be moving to New York on February 1st, and I'm available to interview remotely before then. Just something really, really simple. If you're willing to move, you can indicate a willingness or readiness to move as well. And another option that I've been seeing right now is your willingness and ability to start remote. So some jobs that have required people to move have been pretty flexible about that requirement. So just keep that in mind, that starting remotely might be an option too. So like I said, I think the best thing for your resume and cover letter to do is to share your relevant experience and qualifications. I did another pep talk a couple of weeks ago now, maybe a month ago now. I'm not sure about time, but it's on 4 mistakes that keep your resume small. You can check that out if when you hear me say relevant experience, you're not really sure what that means. I did a whole pep talk on resumes, and there's more coming. But I do think it's great to convey this in a clear way so that people know. Sometimes I'll even have clients put it in the header underneath their contact information. That is a great question. Let's come back to that, the overqualified, underexperienced qualification here. And then another thing that I like to suggest that people do is reach out to professional development groups that are in that geographic area that you're targeting. Like I said earlier, I'm not a big fan of the term hidden job market. I don't think that really describes it well, but there are lots of ways to build relationships with folks who are already, let's just say, in New York or wherever you think you'd like to be. And if you could set up some informational interviews with people in those kinds of organizations, which they tend to be open to, that's why people join these organizations, right? To have these kinds of relationships and conversations. This can be a really great way to just get some insight on where to target your applications. It can be a great way to get some additional informational interviews at companies you may be interested in. So I recommend not just limiting this conversation to your resume and cover letter, but also building some actual relationships online, digitally, of course, for now, as you can. Also, on LinkedIn, you can let recruiters know your geographic area of where you're interested in jobs. So you have several tools and options available to you. And if you're really eager and ready to move, you can use them all. So, all right, let me go on. I'm going to come back to the question about overqualification. Do I have a pen here? I'm just going to try and get through these first. I'm just writing it down because last time I lost a lot of questions because they came in so fast. All right, so I have like 3 questions left to review with all of you. Actually, I think maybe 2. So if you have questions, think about what it is that you'd like to ask or go into more detail about, and we'll get there. All right. So this was a question that actually came up a couple times in the event page chat. And this is like, what is the best way to start a freelance business right now? So this is something that people might be doing while they're waiting for the economy to improve and the job market to improve, or it might just be a really cool transition for you to be making at this point in your career. And so in the Pep Talk show notes, and I'll just put that address back up again, I included a link to one of my favorite books about building a business. And I'm going to suggest that everyone read it. It's called Get Clients Now by CJ Hayden. And I've taken a couple of retreats with her, and I'm a really, really, really big fan. I'll add this link once I'm done with the live too. So if people want to access it more directly. And she has a really simple plan for getting your initial clients, the kind of marketing that you need to do, how to play to your strengths so you don't have to do things that maybe feel wildly out of your comfort zone, and really lay the foundation for like a strong self-employment situation. I'm going to share my favorite strategy, which I'm pretty sure came from her, of letting people know that you are open, available for business, what you're doing, and who you're working with. So think of this as like a business announcement that you send to your network. So I wouldn't just limit this to your professional network. I would be sure to include, things like your former coworkers, things like friends and family. So letting everyone know you're open for business and what it is that you're willing to do. So I actually did this when I left my full-time job, even though I'd already been side hustling for a while, but it was just a good way to kind of make sure that people knew my capacity had increased and what I was doing and how people could get a hold of me. So if you have a web page or something like that, that's great, but it's also not necessary. You can totally set up your LinkedIn profile to get you going on something like this. So grab that book. There's a lot of people selling a lot of expensive things to help you run a business, and this book will take care of like 90% of it. So I really, really recommend it. And my clients who've used it also really like it. It's simple, it's straightforward, it's no fuss, and it works, which is kind of the best part. All right, so there was a really good question that came through. And I maybe don't have the best answer for it, but I want to talk this through and maybe we can talk about it together. But so these 2 questions came in. What are employers looking for right now? And are you seeing any trends in sort of what people are looking for? So I work with clients from like mid-stage, early career, mostly mid-stage to senior professional folks across all industries, truly. Nonprofit, education, tech, sales, marketing, like all functions. That's what makes it fun for me. So it's hard to find trends in a private practice like that where I'm working so broadly across things. But I interpreted this question in another way too, which made me think about what I've been doing with clients who have not been at work that long, so have not been in a job for that long, for example, or who maybe are trying to figure out how to talk about their accomplishments when like business hasn't been going so great. So one of the things that I think is really valuable for people to articulate who are job seeking now is if you've been involved in anything like applying for PPP loans or leading or contributing to rapid pivots of a business to make sure that it continues to exist. I think we need to be putting that on our resume. I've been saying to my clients, I wish this wasn't true, but I suspect we're not through all of the crises that we'll experience. I think there are more crises in our future, and being able to articulate like a crisis skill set, I think is going to be important. And this can also just include things like being able to work remotely or being able to lead a team remotely. Those things I think are going to be increasingly important because I think we'll be working like this with a lot of people working remotely for the future. And so being able to speak really clearly to that, it really crosses industry lines, it crosses function lines in some cases. And if you think about who's been, oh, hey, Nicole, I'm glad you're here. I hope your nails look good. I hope that all of you realize that even if the businesses are struggling right now, many of you are doing a lot of good work to keep them afloat. And so that process is a really critical skill set that I suspect will be important in the future. So I think I answered, let me just see if I got all the questions that freelance business. Yeah, I think I consolidated a couple of them. So hopefully that helps. So now I can take live questions if people have any. And I saw one come up. I'm going to go back up here. How do I overcome this overqualified, underexperienced situation? You didn't say situation, but I assume that's what you mean here. So what I want to offer is that we need to be like really distinctly curating your career narrative. That's what's kind of coming to mind when I hear this particular question. So you may have many, many, many more years of experience than are required, but it might be in a different industry. So it might not feel as relevant. It might not feel as timely. And so here are some things that I've seen people do to really emphasize their more recent experience and relevant skills going forward, which is to consolidate previous work history into job titles, dates, and very minimal description, but to really focus on the more recent roles and to really focus on what is most relevant. So I've sometimes had clients remove bullet points from job descriptions that are really not going to be helpful in building their candidacy. So if they're trying to switch fields or industries or functions and there's something in there that they're just not going to use going forward, but there are more transferable pieces, we can present a real curated narrative around that. And it helps to consolidate the experience. It also just helps, a lot of times what I try to explain to clients is we're trying to reduce questions, like we're trying to reduce uncertainty in the mind of the recruiter, especially. So what I think is really important is speaking to what people need to see. And if they see a lot of less relevant information, they might say, why does this person want this job? But if we can remove some of that and speak to why you do want the job in a super concise way, using a really lovely summary of qualifications, we reduce uncertainty, help people understand the context, and we've consolidated our experience. So I find that, a lot of people, like a lot of overqualified people are getting job offers, like overqualified. I think that the market looks that way right now. And people are really valuing that experience and valuing people who are bringing a lot to the table. That's like kind of what I'm seeing, is that people get traction based on the breadth. But you also want to make sure, these are also people who are definitely taking the time to speak to the specific experiences that are going to be relevant here. All right, what is a good approach for an international student in a job search with a strict deadline? I wonder if this is, so I used to work with research fellows who were under a lot of visa restrictions. And so this is super tricky and really difficult because any of my clients will tell you this process takes longer than you want it to. I say that all the time. It never takes longer than I expect it will, but it does take longer than people want it to. And so what I would think about is what kind of job do you need in order to stay here? And I don't know if you're searching abroad or if you are if you're searching here, but you're from abroad. So I'm just assuming based on the question, using my own experience, what the situation is, but I could definitely be wrong. So I think we need to get really clear on the kinds of opportunities that you're really well aligned for. So a mistake that I see people make, and I think this applies to a lot of people, not just highly educated folks, they apply everywhere, hoping to get traction anywhere. And when I see that, I often think, and a big shift that our clients make is that they move from applying to fewer jobs but with better applications, more strategic applications, really tailored summary of qualifications, really focused bullet points, like really strategic job titles and organizations. And they focus their applications there, they focus their networking there. So it can be a little counterintuitive to apply to fewer places, but to apply to fewer places with better applications can make a world of difference. And that's often what happens for our clients. If you go over to our YouTube channel, I can't remember if it's LinkedIn Pep Notes. I'll have to add it if it is. One of the things that I did is I've interviewed people who've gotten jobs this year, are some of our clients, and all of them will tell you it was their resume that made the difference. And all of them, I'm thinking, many of them were applying to more jobs than they were once they started working with us. So I really think this is kind of an important strategy, is to, if you're applying all over the place hoping for a bite, really check yourself and ask yourself if these are really good applications or if it's worth spending a little bit more time on these applications. All right, how can an older person convince that their skill set can contribute to their business? So I want you to really pay attention to what other people need. A lot of times what I see is that people try to impress on the breadth of their experience, but it's really the specifics of their experience. So if you are applying to a role in a specific field or in a specific function, make sure your experience in that area is super clear. And try to tell, if you're writing a cover letter or you're interviewing or you're networking, try to tell relevant stories. I think people try to connect and, it turns into like a long story about your transition. But you remember, like, part of this is you're marketing yourself. And so that narrative has to be really, really curated. And I think what actually is also really important here is that you know how you can add value and what you're capable of doing. So even though it's really hard, it can feel really hard to get traction in your job search, you definitely have lots of skills and experience that are valuable. So get really clear for you in which roles you've succeeded, what kinds of experience you're really proud of, what results you have to show of that you're really proud of. And when you're clear on that, it becomes a lot easier to communicate it to other folks. What's your advice on how to get the conversation going with a well-connected person in your network with whom you haven't kept in touch with while working? This is hands down one of the most common questions that I get. And so I actually think you should follow up, like a break the ice kind of email. I'm very pro being in touch with people. And I say that with the caveat that it's been a really difficult year. It'll continue to be difficult going forward for the next few months. And some people are really at capacity and maybe not in a position to be helpful to you right now. I think that's just a reality. But it's still okay to ask. And it's okay to follow up. And if you don't get what you're looking for, you can move on. In the Pep Talk that I did a couple of weeks ago, I suggested that people reach out and just send like a happy holidays email, like no ask, just happy holidays, happy new year. Still time to do that. And what's so great about that is that you don't have to ask for anything. You can just re-engage and set yourself up to have a different kind of conversation in the new year. All right, how can I stand out from the crowd with my LinkedIn profile? This is a really great question, Alex, and I'm a big believer in a couple of things. Substance matters above all else, and there's a lot of people with a lot of activity and things going on LinkedIn, and it doesn't necessarily equal substance. And so I would think about, like, what do the people who you want to find you need to hear from you, and how would they best like to receive it? Are they reading your profile? Are they searching for you and finding you on the platform? Who are you looking for? Customers? Are you looking for recruiters? Like who do you want here? And when it comes to LinkedIn, if you're really trying to be found, what I really like are two things. One, making sure it's complete. I always say, like, complete beats cute every day of the week, because it's fundamentally like a search platform, and like we want people to find you. So make sure you have a professional headline, make sure you have job description bullet points, and ideally a professional summary. But also, I don't think we should rely solely on just being found. I think using your profile to reach out proactively to hiring managers or recruiters can be helpful, and you won't have to just rely on your profile. You don't have to turn the thing into a guessing game. You can kind of jump in there and use your profile to explain, to make a case for an informational interview or something like that. All right. Did I miss any? All right, I might have caught up, so if there's any more here. Just going through the comments because I'm afraid I might have missed something. So let's do this. Can you all drop a 1 in the comments if you are an active job seeker right now? I'm curious to hear that. Give you something to do while I scroll through these here. And let me just put my Nicole, I don't know if you'll be impressed by this, but I changed my slide to put our Pep Talk link here. Actually, Joey, that's a really good point. I'm not going to pull your comment up on screen because it's a comment to someone else, but talking about copywriter versus content provider is like those kinds of changes feel small to the point of like being pointless, but they're not pointless. Like they speak to the internal dynamics and communications of the people who will be hiring you. So paying attention to language like copywriter or content creator or content provider or whatever it could be makes all the difference in the world. And the degree that you can align your resume and cover letter to those, to that degree to their language makes a big difference. Obviously, we're doing it with integrity, like we're not making things up. But I think it's super, super critical that we make those minor changes. I once had a client who was a graphic designer and, the whole Adobe suite, she would mimic whether it was like Adobe Suite or they listed all the Adobe programs. She would mimic how they did it. And she swore that was kind of what helped for her. It just helps people starting a freelance business. That's awesome. Nicole. Thank you, Nicole. All right. If you have more questions, feel free to post them. Otherwise, we can wrap up. We'll have another Pep Talk in a couple of weeks. So actually, it's next week. We have one here. I've had an interview before the holidays. How often should I send an email to let them know that I'm interested? Good question. So I think 1 follow-up email, 2 follow-up emails is probably all you can reasonably expect to send. My strong perspective here, and I know that people like to send a lot of follow-up, I do think follow-up is important. People are going to reach out. This can be a funky time of year where people, are on vacation or on holidays or just kind of taking it chill in the office or remote office, home office. So I would send maybe 1 or 2 follow-up emails, but then I would try to move on. I always worry for my clients that while they're waiting, they're not necessarily creating more opportunities for themselves. So we just want to balance that. When they're ready to move forward with your candidacy, they will reach out, but we don't know what that timeline is. And so as you can tell from a lot of my advice, I don't like to just put all of our eggs in the employer's basket. I like for job seekers to have some eggs in their basket too. Here's a question. Do most recruiters read or see an email from premium LinkedIn if you send them a note? So I can't speak for other folks. When I was on the other side, I just got a lot of emails directly. And yes, so I think a lot of people see this. And then one of the reasons I actually really like to suggest reaching out to potential hiring managers is I think that they have fewer requests than recruiters do. Now, my general sense from recruiters is that they really love to have a large network because, they get evaluated on how quickly it takes them, how quickly they can fill a role. So they want to know the right people. But on the other hand, if they don't have something you're a great match for, or they've got other people in the pipeline, they may not have the capacity to respond to you right away. So just keep that in mind. Sometimes I encourage people, if they see a recruiter posting a lot and having a lot of activity, to send them a message without a request for a call or anything like that. Just say, I've been really enjoying your content. Excited to see what opportunities you post and potentially apply down the line or something like that. I get a lot of messages and connections after doing these kinds of things. And I just want to say, some people write the nicest, sweetest messages and some people don't. Some people just start demanding advice and all kinds of things. And so I think it can go a long way just by saying something nice. Like, I love what you're doing. I love what your company is doing. You must be so happy to be there. Don't make things up, because there's no point in like being disingenuous. But if you're a big fan of a company, you're a big fan of what people are sharing, like, let them know that. And that can be enough sometimes to start building a relationship. Yes, Peter, this is apparently recording automatically. So you should be able to use the same link to watch a replay. What advice do we have for veterans seeking employment? Bennett, this is a great question. I have some thoughts on this. I've worked with some clients who are veterans. We also happen, I think, Jenn O'Neill, if you're still here, this is your time to shine. A couple of things that come to mind for me are really spelling out what experience is transferable. I think the military world I come from a military family, so the military world to non-military people is kind of like a black box. And a lot of times people are doing like office jobs, right? And so helping people to understand what you were doing in a way that's easy for them to understand, first of all. Jenn, Dr. O'Neill, if you want to chime in here with any veteran employment advice, please feel free. I lost my train of thought though. GI jobs, yes. What advice? Oh, sorry, I'm seeing the comments coming in. So I would recommend getting really clear and speaking, in like layman's terms as much as possible, but also really thinking about what language are they using? Just like I think Joey was saying earlier, paying small modifications in language can be hugely helpful, and using a lot of military lingo can be just confusing to people. Confusion is really like an underrated obstacle for people to overcome. I think it's really important to be clear. We can make a lot of assumptions about what other folks are doing, but a lot of times there's a ton of gray area and overlap. So then I would think about like, what have you spent the bulk of your time doing? What are you really proud of? How are you explaining this and mapping this on to the opportunities? Like, how are you selecting the opportunities in the civilian world? And what is it that you're excited to bring forward? And just make sure that that is articulated clearly in as plain language as possible and as relevant as possible. Like, that's true for all job seekers. But I think the military world can be very confusing for non-military folks, and they assume. The other piece here, Bennett, is like, I wouldn't miss an opportunity to do some relationship building, because relationships can help overcome that uncertainty. So if people aren't clear about what you're bringing to the table or what your previous experience has meant, having some informational interviews or connecting with some like maybe veterans groups where there's other folks who've made that transition might be a really helpful piece of the process for you. Dr. Jenn O'Neill says, she says, I'm right. That's excellent. No, she says, I'm just going to pull up her comment actually. Showing how your language translates, doing that work for people. I spend a lot of time on my resume, my clients' resumes. And I always say, like, recruiters aren't spending this much time on your resume. So I want you to know that you have to be super clear. Natalie, I feel you. Being super clear is just super critical in this process. And sometimes we get so in our own worlds about what our work is and how to describe it, but it's really important that we kind of take those blinders off and think like, how would a person who doesn't know anything about my work understand this? You're welcome. Okay. Nikisha, I don't think I understand your question. How do I personally, or just how do I suggest? If you want to clarify, I will provide an answer either way. Okay. Should LinkedIn profiles be a copy of an extension of your resume? Good question. And I've actually heard conflicting answers on this. So I'm going to tell you where I land on this and why. I think that by and large, it's helpful for them to mirror each other chronologically. Like, we should be able to, I think, to use them to kind of verify your employment in one way. So it would be strange if it looked like radically different work experience. Now, I've heard from some people who say some employers really like them to look very similar. And My position on that is it's not up to employers what our LinkedIn profiles look like. That's your space. That's where you get to connect with your colleagues. And I know that some people use LinkedIn for work and need to kind of balance both the personal and the professional. And we're all balancing the personal and professional here, but you know what I mean. So I think that there's room here to not do both. And in fact, with the LinkedIn and the resume and the cover letter, none of them should be exactly the same. They're all an opportunity to do something different. So Carol, you can think of LinkedIn as a place where your colleagues can speak about you. They can write you references, right? That you can have right on your profile. People can see what professional organizations you're involved with. They can see how many relationships you have and how you're engaging with people in your field. They can hear from you in your own voice and your own tone about a summary of your work. It doesn't have to look exactly like it does on your resume. The one thing to keep in mind is that your LinkedIn needs to work for all of the jobs that you're applying for, but your resume needs to work for the job that you're applying for. So one of the ways that I help clients kind of keep these things together in alignment, even if they're trying to kind of respond to different needs, is to think about themes. So instead of just thinking about job titles and functions and organizations, think about, can you speak to leadership skills or communication skills? Like think about what your strengths might be thematically, and that's how I like to help people write their LinkedIn profile. All right. Oh, hi, Betsy. It's great to have you here. Oh, you're welcome, Nicole. I hope you're not looking for a job. It always concerns me when Nicole tells me she's thankful for my advice. Okay. What's your advice on getting a recruiter to give you constructive feedback and respond after an interview after they've sent you a canned no thank you email? I think this is not going to be what you want to hear, what anyone wants to hear, but actually drop a 1 in the comments if you've ever had this happen to you, where you haven't gotten any feedback, you've gotten a canned rejection response. Because this is actually pretty standard. And here's my take on this, which job seekers don't necessarily love. I think that the sheer volume of emails and messages and work on recruiters is completely overwhelming for most people. It can be a very fast-paced job. They're interfacing with a lot of people. And I think there are often policies or conditions in the workplace that prevent them from having a relationship and communicating with potential candidates in the way that they might like. So I would just keep that in mind. I don't think any of this is really personal. I'll also just add that giving the no's and giving the feedback can be really difficult. Not everyone has the capacity to do this. Not everyone has organizational buy-in. It can kind of, I think, set you up for problems. It's great when this happens. Like when this happens, I think it's a gift, but I don't think it's normal. And I don't think that there's a ton of space for recruiters to kind of take on this role. My advice to you is to really think about what went well, what didn't go well, what you liked, what you didn't like, where you'd like to feel more confident going forward. And if you can, try to find a peer or someone who can debrief with you so that you can kind of process that and make sense of it. I don't think it means anything that, people often just get a canned no thank you email. I think that's pretty normal. I think that's how people manage the volume of people that they're interacting with, is by sending those canned messages. So I know it's kind of a tough pill to swallow, but that is my strong sense, Nicole. I'm not going anywhere. All right, so it's 4:38. Let me do a last call for any questions or anything people want me to dive deeper about. Just going to scroll through and make sure I didn't miss anything. And while I'm waiting, I will just add our next Pep Talk is January 6th, which I think is that next week? It is next week. No, it's not next week. It's the week after, right? It's January 1st. No, it is next week. We're going to be talking about assessing your 2021 career goals. And we're going to be talking about inputs. Okay, everyone always tries to extrapolate as much work out of themselves as possible, but we're going to be talking about what you need to do, what you need to have, what you need to give yourself in order to expect to have a successful job search. That doesn't help to know the troubles of the other side. I always feel really bad because I think recruiters get a really bad rap. And my husband's a recruiter, so I know that they sometimes feel like they get a bad rap. But if you think about it, there's sometimes, thank you, Joey, I appreciate that. There's hundreds of candidates and there's dozens of jobs. And sometimes recruiters are responsible for like 4 or 5 jobs, and sometimes they're responsible for like dozens. So I think it's really important to keep in mind, when you know what their work life is like, it makes it a lot easier to know what to expect and how to engage with some of these people. I always like to say, like, I'm a career coach, they're not your career coach. So it's good to know the difference. Let's see, your thoughts on screening questions that automatically eliminate you when you say no. Can you say yes to get through and explain later? So let me say a couple of things about this. I think you can probably say yes and explain later if there's like a really compelling reason, but I want to encourage you to think about why these screening questions are in place. I was actually just talking about this with my husband last week, because I think this goes back to this initial question of like, I don't have the right experience. You actually might not have the right experience for some jobs, but I doubt that you won't have the right experience for every job. And these screener questions are telling you what is important to the person who is hiring. Sometimes it's about salary, sometimes it's about years of experience, sometimes it's about what you have, what you've done previously. And I think when you say yes, but you mean no, then regardless of your explanation, you could very well look like you're not coming into the process with integrity. And recruiters will go to bat sometimes for some of their candidates. And I have a hard time believing that recruiters want to go to bat for people that aren't being straightforward. So one thing that you could do is you could always kind of reach out to a recruiter and say, like, I said yes, and here's why. Because I think like integrity is a core value of ours. And so I don't want to try and go around these things. Feel like barriers, but for most companies and organizations, they're actually like equal opportunity mechanisms. So when we try to get around them, what we're actually trying to get around is some sense of internal equity, which I'm not a fan. I think we need more equity, not less equity. We just need to know what it looks like. So I think we should be honest. And sometimes, too, they're there to make sure that you know what you need to get into, what the level of expertise is required. So I don't know if that's helpful. I guess I think being honest is important, because being honest is how we get a job that's a great fit for us. And I know when we're really, really eager to have something, we can feel like we can waffle on what's a great fit, but people want to hire people with integrity and with honesty. So just keep that in mind, because I think that's just as important as experience. All right, I'll step off my soapbox. What do you recommend for me to do to generate leads so I can find clients to tutor for math? I am established online as a virtual math teacher. I do not know of the needs of any school districts or communities, but I'm not the person to ask for something like that. Maybe there are people here, so maybe you can get in touch with Nikisha if this is you. But here are a few things that I would do. I would look for like virtual community bulletin boards and forums and try to share my services and let people know what I do. I might do like a free workshop for kids, like maybe in the middle of the day when their parents are home and their parents are also working, and try to do like a lesson or something to show people a little bit about what you're able to do. I would get in touch with teachers, parent associations, and just try to spread the word, send a welcome announcement, and do something like that. I have to say, like 85% of my business is writing emails. It's not super fancy, but it's true. I think I have your question here, Nikisha. Okay, so Pam, this is a good question. So I can't speak for all organizations, so I'm not going to try and do that. But this question about self-identifying with an injury, if there's anyone here who wants to chime in on if they know how their company handles this, please feel free to share, because I don't think it's the same everywhere. We actually used to collect that information about who self-identified there, but it was not paired with the applicant's information. So we were just using that information to make sure that we were including a wide and diverse pool of applicants, not to make any meaning over who got into the applicant pool and who didn't. So I just think it's actually interesting how many of these questions have to do with what are often like internal equity and external equity measures. That's what we did at the organization where I worked. That data was not ever seen by the same people, or at least not by the same people who made the decision. I actually saw the information, but I didn't always make all the decisions, or even most of the decisions sometimes. So, at the front end of the process, people are collecting that, but who gets to see the application is different than maybe who gets to see the applicant disclosures with regard to that. Okay. So I actually answered this earlier, so you can go back and check out the question. I think it was like the second question that I answered, and this is pretty common for a lot of people. You can go ahead and mention it in your LinkedIn, in your cover letter and resume briefly as a one-liner. You can say you're ready to move and will be there effective February 1st, or you can say ready and willing to move as soon as, and then just provide a date. I don't prefer to share a ton of that information over your actual qualifications. So just keep it, keep it concise. I feel like I say concise, like that's probably everyone's takeaway. So your resume should be concise. All right. You're welcome, Pam. All right. So this is going to be my last call for any questions folks want answered. This is our last pep talk of the year. We're doing these a couple of times a month to share really actionable advice that folks can take to take ownership over their careers. Many of you have a lot more control and power in this situation, and we want to empower you to be making moves that matter right now because we think that's super important. Let's see. Oh, I did answer that, Nikisha. So that's in the video. Okay. Yep. All right. So I hope you will all consider joining me when we do assessing your 2021 career goals. I'm going to be sharing what you need to do to move your career goals forward. Let me just put something up before we wrap up here. You can find me on Instagram. You can find us here on LinkedIn. You can connect with me personally. And if you want to stay in touch, just make sure you're following either me or Work Wonders Careers, and we'll let you know about upcoming events. As we're wrapping up, if anyone wants to share what their biggest takeaway is, you can let me know in the comments. Oh, thanks, Rosanna. That's a great suggestion. Awesome. So please feel free to share this video with your network, with anyone who may be job seeking right now. And if you have questions, you can always come back later and post them here. I try to keep an eye on them, so I'm happy to answer any questions. I will be out of the office later this week, and I'm wishing all of you a little time off, a very happy and healthy new year, and here's hoping to a better and brighter and safer 2021 for all of us. Thank you all for being here. Awesome. Thank you. Jen is texting me before we're even done here. Bye, Cynthia. Thanks for being here. Thanks, Vivian. Thank you, Nikisha. You can always rewatch the replay if you're looking for more advice. Yes, that's right, Pam. Oh, awesome. I'm glad to hear that, Lucina. Bye, Nicole. Thanks for being here. Hope your nails look fabulous. Awesome. I'm so glad to hear it, Renee. Bye, Jen. I'll text you. Awesome. Have a really great rest of your week, everyone. I'll see you soon. You're welcome, Alex. Persistent and professional. I love it, Reginald. That's great. Bye, Joe. Bye, Elizabeth. Bye, Kevin. Belinda. Awesome. Thanks, Pam. Thanks, Rosanna. I hope you're well. Me too. Awesome. All right. Bye, everyone.